Hey, it's your boy Chrys, Players Pick Podcast, here to shout out my sponsor, Road Roaster Coffee. Road Roaster Coffee makes an amazing array of light, medium, and dark roasts. My favorite is this kick-ass right here. You can check out roadroastercoffee.com and use Players Pick as your coupon code for 20% off your very first order. Enjoy the pod.
Players Pick Podcast. Picks and perspective with Chris Johnson. Palpable. Paradox. Polarity.
Cool.
Yeah.
Welcome, man. This is episode 104 of
Lovely.
Players Pick Podcast. Yeah, man. So it's funny. I think we met in Nashville at Nashville NAMM, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess the year. No, like I was going to say it way earlier. Like 2012, maybe 2011, actually.
I think it was, I think you're right. I think it was 10 or 11
Yeah,
because I was still with Ampeg.
exactly.
You came over to check out the Ampeg amps, the guitar
Yeah.
amps. Yeah. I found you.
Precisely.
What was the booth that you were playing? Were you playing at the guitar booth or?
Yeah, I was sort of just floating. Well, actually, I was playing for Nick Huber.
Yeah.
And I had the very first version of like this guitar sort of then. But
That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was I was just scouting around, that time. It's Summer NAMM is always a little small and kind of quaint.
casual,
Yeah, casual.
easier to wander around.
Exactly. Yeah, you can get through
Yeah.
it in about 20 minutes versus like 2.5 days at the
Yeah.
the winter one. But I was kind of like scouting for guitar players. Hey, come check out our amps, to get somebody to come over here and play this thing. And I got enamored with you and your playing and the way that you were playing. You have kind of like such a great jazz style that you mix in. I mean, you're very jazz oriented anyway, but I was captivated by kind of how you use the bass notes and like to follow and accompany yourself essentially,
Yeah.
which is still like I understand the concept, but as a player, it's like it's almost Greek, it's almost like a total different thing for me because I don't
tend to
that
play
way.
like I'm watching me instead.
Oh, interesting. It's like you want it.
Out of body experience almost.
Really? Is that a common thing for you, your experience when you play throughout the years, or is that something that developed?
It's an excuse for mistakes.
Okay.
No, I
Fair.
don't. Yeah, no, that's probably a bit too deep. No, not really.
You can go as deep as you want here, bro.
Yeah,
We got time.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so it's been a long time, man.
Yeah, and then I think we've caught up a handful of times through the years. I mean, and then it was like the last time I want to say that we saw each other in person was I was still at Dunlop, and I think we did Soul Food in Marin, didn't we?
We did, in Santa Fe. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's such a great place to eat.
Yeah. Love that area of the world. That was like the first place I sort of went to in the US was that area because my aunt and uncle used to live there. So it was a nice, easy base of somewhere I could go and stay for free.
That's cool. And what a wonderful place. I mean, everybody talks about it as far as like, the general vibe of the Bay Area and North Bay in particular. But until you're there for a while and you kind of travel the back roads to the coast a time or two,
Of course.
then I feel like until that happens, like you don't really even know what's even happening there. I mean, the music scene and everything else can be cool. But that's maybe my favorite part. Maybe that's why I say that.
No, it is, man. Up into the mountains, like, some of my dearest friends live in like Fairfax and Occidental.
Love Occidental.
So it's become sort of a little second base when I've been in the US. It's pretty awesome up there. Yeah.
And so it's been a while since you had to go. Did you have to go home when the pandemic hit? What happened?
Well, yeah, it was a weird situation in that I was at NAMM 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to come back to Australia to pack up all my stuff to move to the US permanently, basically. And the flight to come back was 2 days after the world lockdown.
Wow.
So never got on the flight, had to get out of a lease in LA from a distance. There's still music gear all across LA, and people have actually moved now with it. So I think some of it's in like Vegas and stuff now. And, it was just actually setting up life in Australia. We didn't have a place here either. So we were with my parents for a lot of lockdown, which is nice because they're great and get along. So it wasn't too bad. But it's, then just been setting up life in Australia because, our borders weren't open really, I think, until December last year. I think they finally opened up again, that you're allowed to leave Australia without some crazy reason. But, whether I wanted to just yet was also the question. But
Right. It's like, can you, do I want to? And since you've been there through the pandemic, there's been lots of stories on the outside about Australia that seem horrifying. And I don't know, I haven't really talked to anybody that's like been, to put my thoughts at ease. I mean, how has it been there during the whole thing?
Honestly, it's been pretty awesome.
Oh,
I've got to say,
good.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of, I know I've got some weird questions doing like live streams sometimes that go on a weird tangent, but it was like, initially it was like the first lockdowns were hard, but I did my first gig like in June 2020, and then it was just sort of normal life here. Really? Like there were still restrictions, but I was like out playing and doing things until I think it was halfway through last year. So halfway through 20 when the Delta thing broke out, and then we locked it back down again.
Oh, I see.
But it was it was pretty good, man, because it just sort of seemed like, I was just out playing and doing things while you guys were all still locked away doing live streams. So it was pretty good for the most part.
Okay, well, that's good. That's wonderful to hear, because I know this, media from different places has different objectives, and they want to hype up fear around things, and like, look what's happening over here. The world's coming to an end.
It was actually pretty good. There was a lot of it was a general positive thing, and I think being able to be here and be out playing was awesome. So I definitely, talking to like my band in LA, and like they're going, man, I can't believe you're doing a gig tonight. I can't believe you're doing 3 gigs like this week. Like, what's going on? Mainly local. It's not really on the road and touring, but it was still, it's been awesome.
Well, it's interesting too, because here in the States, there have been pockets of that going on, where it's relatively normal life, even in 2020, even though like the majority of, probably outside looking in looks, again, probably like, oh man, America's squashed, they don't have anything going on because they're locked down. But like, I ended up moving back home up to Northern California, into Chico, like about 3 hours from the Bay. And it's, for what worse or for better, it's a little more conservative and a little more freedom based. And so there was like, it's half and half. And so part of the community is like, hey, like we gotta keep doing things. We can't shut everything down. And, I think everybody's somewhere in the middle, like, I want to be safe, but I also need my life. And I would like to be safe, but I also want my life.
It's definitely been interesting, and just finding a balance with everyone. So, but
well, it's all over, right? So we're good.
Something like that.
I don't know. Just waiting for the next shoe to drop, to be honest. But well, aside from that, man, it sounds like you were about to release. You ended up releasing a record in 2020. This album, Unify, right? Which is a fantastic record. Congratulations on that.
Thanks.
And I don't know how much you've been able to play or for that. It sounds like a little bit out and about.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been able to do a little bit in support of it in Australia, which has been cool. A few shows, I guess. A lot of it was streaming gigs and learning to play the record solo because I didn't particularly write it for solo guitar. So it was a very steep, quick learning curve into a couple of different things of how to pull things off solo. But it was, oh man, 2020 for releasing a record was the worst. But, I really struggle sitting on albums as most musicians do. So, I sat on it I think I had finished it in January because I still had a little home studio set up at my parents' house and I could mix the album there. And so I was like, well, I've got to get it done before I move because I'm not packing up studio monitors and things to take with me. So I had it all done and it got released in August and we'd sort of set that in place, I think in probably late March, just after it all locked down. I'm like, well, I'll wait till then because then it'll be all cool. And I'll be, but yeah. It was just a shame because the plan was, because I recorded that album in LA, it was the first time I'd actually done something outside of Newcastle and with these great guys that I've been playing with in LA, drummer Justin Glasgow and bass player Joel Gottschalk. And, we just become really good friends. So, the idea was that, we're going to be able to actually go and play it together and then further develop things. And we haven't played since. So, yeah.
Well, so there sounds like there's an opportunity sitting here waiting as soon as you're able and, to come back and do some of that, right?
Yeah, that's hopefully the plan. We'll just see how it all works out. Yeah.
And you have a new single, right? Defining of Success, or no? I'm sorry, that's the older album.
No, that's all right. Yeah, I released a couple
Keeping
of
Up
singles.
Appearances.
Yeah. So there were a couple of cool things. Keeping Up Appearances was a leftover actually from that Unify sessions.
Oh, okay.
Where I had this song and it didn't really fit on the album and it was just sort of bugging me. So over Christmas here, the last outbreak kind of blew up pretty crazy. So I kind of shelled up at home for a little while and just got to work and created that. And so that's sort of been the last little while because we've had a couple of late lockdowns in Australia. So there was one the end of last year and I released a single called Chapters from that. And it was a funny thing because I was trying to collaborate with this drummer that I used to play with about 15 years ago, but he now lives in Hong Kong. And we just couldn't coordinate getting a studio and all those things. So I found old things he'd played on 15 years ago and found this awesome brushes track for a completely different song that I was singing on when I thought I would be John Mayer for a little while. And so I just wrote a new song around this awesome brushes track.
Wow.
So we got to collaborate, but he just did it 15 years earlier. So
that's
cool.
Really cool. So you found a track that you could sample his brushes from, type of thing? Is that
no, literally, like I basically just had the song there, the original thing, deleted everything else I'd played, and then just was playing along to this song and wrote the song around the drum track and the accents and the fills. And I ended up having to cut and paste 2 extra bars into it to make it work.
Amazing. That's fun.
And it was cool. It was awesome. And you can hear like when I play that we'd played together so much because there's all these things that sound like we've played live together. All accents and things, and it just sort of happened really naturally. So that was a really cool lockdown project last year. Yeah.
Love that. Modern technology for the win on that,
Yeah, modern technology and, creative archiving from the old days. I'd probably save that to a DVD, I'm going to say. I was just lucky I'd moved it to a hard drive at some point. Yeah.
That's so cool that you've stayed busy, you've stayed creative in the process. Do you feel like you write a lot, like all the time and you're always archiving stuff, or does it kind of come in waves?
I write, yeah, I realized, especially in the last 2 years where I haven't been, actively on tour, I guess, I just realized that I actually compose more than I practice, that I'm always actually trying to create something new. I'm not really thinking about how to play songs I already know or even learn other songs. I'm always trying to compose something new. So, yeah. So, yeah, the last 2 years have really, there's about 5 albums that I have to get out this year.
Whoa.
So,
5?
like, let me think. There's that one, there's that one, there's that one, there's that one. Yeah, I reckon it's nearly 5.
Man.
And one's nearly finished, and then the other few will come soon. So,
And how do you go about as releasing that much music? Are you like cognizant of like trying to be very like proactive in the promotion of it, like or are you thinking like, oh, I'm gonna drop an album, do a little bit of promo, and then just not worry about it, drop another album? And or what's your plan around stuff like that?
Well, yeah, there's not a whole lot of a plan. I think the reality at the moment is, well, promotion and how it works just seems to evolve so quickly. We don't really I don't know. And the timeline of things just finishes so quick. Like, you release an album, you spend, 3 or 4 months getting it out to media, and then, you don't sort of let fans know till a month before. and then it's sort of like all happening for 2 weeks after, and then that's it. I don't know. And it almost feels like you need something else, maybe less, to release then. Just from my experience in the last little while, it sort of seems that from what I've observed, it's the people that are constantly working on things and then, have something else to release post that album within a couple of months that seem to keep momentum and, press and media interested a little bit more. That might be without being able to talk about touring and things, but that's sort of been what I've observed over the last 2 years.
Do you feel compelled by the need to like feed the machine, like the social media and like the to not be forgotten, or does the writing and the composing just come naturally in these bigger, like you keep writing as it comes, and all of a sudden you just find yourself with 5 albums that you have to release?
That's basically it. I'm not good at feeding social media. I really can't stand being in front of a camera, and I've got worse as I've got older. I used to be fine with like jumping in, like, thinking back to how we met. Yeah, man, I'll do a video for you. Cool. Yeah. And now I'm just like, I don't want to do a video. So
I can't blame you.
So the idea of like doing like recordings and audio actually really excites me. And, I don't know if I'm old school or if it's just how I've always been. Like, I'm not one that's engaged with YouTube. Like, I don't sit and watch YouTube. I've never sat and watched a concert on YouTube or anything. And so the idea, but I always listen to audio. Occasionally I'll, rip the audio from a concert on YouTube to listen to in the car, but I don't sit and watch things as much. So that's probably where I'm coming from. It's my own ideology of it.
Yeah, so I can see if you don't engage that medium in that way, then you're not necessarily thinking, you're not creating for that platform either, right? So
no, definitely not. It's funny, like if I go to shoot, like, and I do specific social media content when, every 5 weeks when I go, I really should do something. I, as soon as I go to do it, I go, I don't want to play anything flashy. I just want to play and just hear how the notes sustain on things. And I self-sabotage myself, but anyway.
Well, let's slide into that because, I mean, so my audience here is varied, but I have a lot of have a lot of shredders because I know a lot of shredders, right? And a lot of people that are into that. And you represent something that a lot of those people can cross over into and be experience because you have your own unique flavor of complexity. And I feel especially the shredders oftentimes look over at the jazzers and go, yeah, I have no idea what those voicings or the inversions or how you're leading and all this stuff. So it can be a new world. And I always feel like it, even though I love and immerse myself in a lot of jazz style playing, you have so much in reserve, which I love. Like you can shred it up, you can go hard and do all this complex stuff. But I noticed that a lot of your wheelhouse is more in this spacious, like dynamic, like you craft tone, like and I that's apparent to me. Like when I listen to Adam Miller, I'm like, oh, he's like, I love the way that the tone, especially when you're playing that guitar, that Nick, a lot of times that you have it. I don't know if this exactly what the combination is. You can speak to that, but it feels like the volume is always rolled off a little bit. You've got a little bit of grit sitting just behind it, and you're always able to increase that dynamic or lessen it in a really beautiful way. Sometimes it's through the percussiveness of how you're using a pick or fingers, but there's this simplicity and spaciousness around what you do. And so for you to say, oh man, when I get in front of the camera, I just kind of want to just hear the notes ring out. But I hear that in your playing also, in the way that you compose. So maybe you can speak to a little bit of that and you know, where your head is at with music in that respect.
Like, well, yeah, tonality is everything to me. Like, even from the point of view of listening to music, you know, a lot of people say, well, what do you... The first thing that strikes to me is tonality. If I can't listen to something if the tone doesn't sit with me. It doesn't matter how good something is. Like, I really struggle to enjoy it. So it's sort of the thing that I'm probably working on just as much, you know. I did spend all day today trying to work out how to make a direct thing sound almost as good as my amp, and I probably spent about 5 hours doing that today because I have a gig in a few weeks where I've got to fly in, and I don't know if I can get a hold of an amp. So I was just trying to work out something that would make me happy. But so I spend a lot of time doing that. And it's all, it probably comes back to my acoustic guitar history. And when I was younger, I realized whenever I played electric guitar, I was always trying to impersonate someone. You know, like, it wouldn't matter what I did. I'm like going, okay, so now I'm trying to sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan. Now I'm trying to sound like Clapton. You know, I spent my whole life trying to sound like Robin Ford. And just, you know, like, but whenever I played an electric guitar, that's sort of what happened to me. And then, so like in my mid-20s, I basically just went, I'm not playing electric guitar anymore. I'm only playing acoustic guitar, because then I don't think about this stuff, which was a musical decision as well. It was like I was spending so much time going, what pedal am I going to use for this part? Or like that it confused my playing so much. So for a long time, I only played acoustic guitar. And then by the time I got back to electric guitar again and excited about it, I had to find guitars that were slightly left of center so that I had no tonal reference for them. So,
cool.
you know, my first step was I built this thin line telly from parts, and it was... it sort of was to look like a guitar that Bill Frisell had. And basically it's like, it's an MJT body, and then it's a solid one-piece rosewood neck from Warmoth, I think, made it. Yeah, it's a Warmoth one. And then I put a Firebird mini humbucker in the neck because I'd always just wanted to try that pickup and see what it was like. And I think I'd just done a run of shows with a guitar with P90s and it was buzzing its head off, and I went, I want it quiet. So yeah, and so when I got that guitar, I was like, oh wow, this sort of is familiar, but it doesn't sound like anything I've ever played. So it really gave me a foundation of not thinking about it again, going back to treating the guitar like an acoustic and seeing what I could get out of it. And then this Huber was sort of born of that as well, which is like a giant, it's essentially a giant telly. You know, it's 25.5-inch scale. It's got single coil pickups. But it sort of also then gets more into the acoustic sort of side of it. It's still got a block through the center, but it's really loud. Like, and it, you know, with the gold foils, it sort of translates that really well through the amp. So, yeah, so that's sort of always what I'm going for, is just that touch sensitivity. Like, you know, on my guitars, volume and tone are at full. My telly doesn't even have a tone control because I just have never used a tone control. I don't like the sound of it. You know, I've been playing 2-rock amps for like 16 or 17 years now.
Wow.
And before that, I was always trying to play something like a Dumble. So, well, I never had a Dumble, but...
Very few
you know,
have.
And then I had like a old Mesa Boogies, like Mark IIs and things. I've still got a Mark II-C, which has been heavily modified, unfortunately. But yeah, so, and that's sort of like the basis of everything. And then, yeah, just a light overdrive pedal with the idea of that if I'm playing soft, it's clean. And if I'm playing hard, it's just got that grit around the edges. And yeah, that's sort of my whole thing, I guess.
So the tone, so the kind of pulled back sound is probably shaped through your amplifier and pedal combination. It's, to me, it sounded a little bit like a rolled off volume, but and you're saying that the volume always stays all the way up.
Yeah, it's probably, I think it's also just the way I attack the guitar. So it's like I do play a lot with my fingers. So, well, with flesh, so no nails or anything. So it's just, it's always that sort of rounded out attack. And then like guitar pick wise, I do use a Dunlop and I only use one. And I only just ran out of bags that I got from you years ago.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like this, the Primetone 308. And so I don't ever change my pick, ever. Like I just... and the idea was that it was the closest thing I could find that sounded like my fingers. So yeah, it's funny because lots of people have huge collections of picks and I just have one.
I love that though. So that's like that also is very, very in line with the rest of your, what it seems like your methodology is, right? Like simple, like least amount of moving parts. And, you know, like you said, like a lot of your tonality comes with how you approach the instrument versus having a load of effects. Although I see your pedal board changes here and there.
There's some stuff. Yeah. It's just to take away the options. I think that's always been the thing for me, is as soon as I've got more options, I get confused and lost and forget about playing music. So the guitar pick thing was a really good thing for that. Like just to go, basically in the last 20 years, I've used 3 different picks. So it was like, yeah. So the pick that you have too, just to be clear, because people hear you say Primetone and then 308, a lot of people, that's an older pick. It's an older design that's like prior to the current Primetone. That Dunlop. I mean, Dunlop still makes those picks, but I think, or maybe I'm not even sure. No,
actually,
they're still current. Yeah,
you still order them. Yeah.
Yeah.
They have a little chunky bevel on them, right? Like a funky.
Yeah, they've got like a little grip thing. So, you know, I believe, well, to me, they look like a copy of the pick I used before this, actually.
And what was that?
Which, Vegan.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I can't remember where they were from. They were brutally expensive. But they did last forever, whatever the material was. Like these I'll go through in a weekend. Like if I'm playing shows, they develop rough edges, and then I'm not a fan, so they go. But these other ones used to last months. They were crazy. But whatever the material is, just had this bright snap on the edge. So, whereas these don't have that, they have this rounded edge to the attack, which was like, what was I? And then the first pick I settled on before the Vagans was I'm trying to say it. It's the Dunlop Gator 2mm.
Oh, the Gator grip, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And they're still like, I think, the best sounding pick I've ever heard. That material is just so smooth, but having a bit of extra thickness and the grip and the size of these is
I could see how I think I showed you, I think I maybe even brought you some of the Flow 420s, because I was thinking maybe you'll dig these, but I think the material, the Ultex, is maybe too bright for you. Was part of the deal?
Funnily enough, I still have one of those in my wallet, and it's like it is good if I have to play a strummy acoustic guitar part and it just needs a little bit more edge to it, so I will use it for that. Yeah.
So the material, I think that the 308s, I think it's maybe more of a softer polymer type of thing, so that's why it wears down a little bit quick, and that's why it's also more closely related to your fingertips.
Exactly.
It's kind of a muted tone on that.
Yeah. So taking away those options for me really helps. And then basically I really only use, the one amp or the one brand of amp. And so as long as I've got one of those, I'm usually fine. And then it's just the few overdrive pedals that I keep finding endless options in. Yeah, if I turn on all 5 that regularly rotate, you'd never hear the difference.
Because you're usually probably crafting them towards the same thing. You want to be able to sound like you.
Exactly. I can't. Yeah, just everything ends up at the same place. So it's funny.
Yeah, that's the funny part about a lot of us electric players. Is like, I've got I'm sitting here surrounded by 20 guitars, right?
Yeah.
I've got 6, 7, and 8 string, right? So there's differences there, but I sound like me, no matter which guitar I have. Even though when I pick it up and I hear, I go, oh man, I hear these pickups, man. They sound like blah 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 today, Or
and that's fine too, man. Like that's the whole thing. That's the inspiration to the musician. It's just I'm also aware of how ridiculous it is. Yeah.
That's kind of the fun of it, is to say, especially once you've been down the tone quest for long enough, and you're like, oh man, I'm just going in circles. I was looking for this in the beginning, and I'm still buying pedals that give me the same thing, but a little bit different, tiny bit.
Yeah, because I've been working on a new record at the moment. I've been listening to a few of my old ones, from 8-9 years ago, and I go, man, what was I using on that? What guitar is that? What pedal is that? That sounds amazing.
Who is this guy?
Stop using that. Yeah. Listen to me play so much better than I do now. What's going on? Yeah.
That's funny, because sometimes, occasionally I hear that in myself. I'll go back and I'm like, oh man, I was onto something here. Yeah. And then, but mostly I'm like, oh man, I'm like, I listen to myself. I'm like, I don't want to listen to that anymore. I want to try to make something better now, or something. It inspires me to be more current, I guess, in that respect. But
totally.
Do you remember, your first couple of guitar picks, and how when you first started playing, what the guitar pick meant to you in the early days?
From memory, not a whole lot. Although, I think I started playing guitar when I was around 8 or 9 years old. And I certainly remember the whole, the classic Fender picks being around. And then I think I had a teacher that told me I need to use really thin picks. Actually, I did, and I know the teacher. And so that's cool. But it the nylon 0.38s.
Oh, wow. Super thin. The thinnest.
Yeah, that was the thing here in the time. early 90s. And I remember getting one and actually at the time thinking, this is terrible. I can't possibly use this. And then I remember, and then after that, all I used, I was 0.73 and 0.88 of those nylon picks. And then eventually I got to a 1 mil. I got to the black one. I was like, oh, this is better that it's not moving as much. And then the 2 mil picks basically came up when I saw, I was opening for Tommy Emmanuel. And so I saw that he had these picks that were 2 millimeter thick, and I'd never seen anything like that in a store in Australia. And so I had to order them. And I don't think I could get the ones he had, and I got the Gator ones. And so that's what I stuck with then.
Wow, what a cool way to find your pick, is to be opening and be impressed upon by Tommy.
Yeah, exactly, man. It was just like that. Oh, yeah, cool. And, I grew up with Tommy Emmanuel as my idol, which was how a lot of Australian guitar players grew up, because he was just a household name. He was on all the TV shows every week playing. His albums were in the pop charts. So it was just, everyone knew him. Like, everyone knew who Tommy Emmanuel was. So it was, he was a giant in Australian culture at the time. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, with this era now, you're working on a new album, and it's going to be something. I mean, you have 5 albums, but like, are you are you you're writing? Are you writing an album now for release like next year, or like this is a part of the 5 that you're kind of thinking of? Or
well, yeah. So I'll talk about it now. The first album that I'm finishing right now is it was another thing done in our last Australian lockdown, so the second half of last year, where I realised I couldn't go into a studio with anyone in Australia. So I got on to the guys in LA and said, hey, do you want to do something over Zoom? And so they were able to go into the studio together and play live to tracks that I'd, recorded for them. And I was on Zoom. I'd worked out the delay time just enough to be able to direct them for things. So we set up in a triangle in Justin's studio in LA. And so they were there, and then I was ahead on a laptop screen across from him. But it was actually a really awesome experience. Justin has set up his studio incredibly for remote recording and doing all those sessions. And so it kind of felt like I was there. It was really cool. So, and the songs that I'm working on, these ones were sort of more poppy in their nature, I guess, like a little, rather than, the jazz side of things. They're, clear forms and shorter solos and that sort of thing. So it worked well, this batch of songs, to do remotely rather than in a room at the same time. So I'm pretty excited about that. It's it's very singer-songwriter-y without the singer.
So, and this is the same lineup as 2020 Unify. Yeah.
Okay.
Very great players. I mean, you always choose incredible players, but
yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah, those guys are great. Justin's like Justin. He probably works predominantly as a producer and engineer. He does all the Scary Pocket Stories sessions.
Oh,
so
really?
He records all the stories stuff and mixes and masters that stuff, which is huge. But as a drummer, he's played on huge things. As a bass player, he's played on huge things. It's sort of crazy to me in Australia just to hear sort of what people have just done randomly, because it seems so distant to me being here. And then Joel was Philip Sace's live touring bass player for a long time. And he's just, great. And the guys are just, really good friends. Like, that's always what I'm looking for in a band. You just want people you like to look at and sort of feel vulnerable around as well, that you can talk about what songs are about and go, getting through, things. So,
that's super
really
important.
Nice. Yeah. It's always my first priority.
but that makes sense to me too, because again, like the kind of the intimate nature of the way you play and the way that you approach the instrument,
Yeah.
it would indicate some, that you're a relationship based person, that you wouldn't just hire somebody just to play the parts as I wrote them necessarily. Like
Yeah.
you're
No,
like
you
more.
always, yeah, you always want a conversation back and to let people do as much as possible. And, that's not to say in the past I haven't got heroes into play that I don't know very well, but they've always ended up friends after that. So,
Very cool.
that is the beauty of music, I guess, that, you can connect in these ways that you would never connect otherwise. So,
It's wonderful.
yeah, yeah.
So in the process of your career, I mean, you mentioned something about, for a moment, you wanted to be John Mayer and you were going to be singing. Do you put out an album of singing that I don't know about? Or
Yeah, I did an EP that it was it was pre being able to put things online, like pre iTunes and that sort of stuff. And I think I printed 50 CDs and 30 of them got stolen out of my car one day with a whole bunch of other rare CDs. So they're actually, I did see them on eBay a while ago at a secondhand store, like 300 miles from where I live. Randomly. So yeah, the simple thing for me, especially like talking about lyrics and singing, is I can sing okay. Like I'm not any good. Basically, like I can kind of sing in tune, but lyrically I had nothing to write about, and I realized I just never listened to lyrics my whole life. To the point where, I was playing my 10-year-old nephew a while ago, like Red Hot Chili Peppers stuff, and then went, whoa, okay, I never realized this was what was going on here. Or I was just hearing the music,
yeah.
It never occurred to me. So, and, a great friend of mine actually said, because I'd already released 2 instrumental albums at that time, I'd been touring with Tommy Emmanuel quite a bit in Australia. And he said, oh man, when you play guitar, it's really incredible and something special. And when you sing, you're just like an average singer-songwriter. And I was like, yeah, good point.
Well, so that must have been a good friend.
Yeah, somewhat.
Yeah. Well, even if they weren't like a super tight friend, it's always impressive when somebody in your circle has the guts to speak.
Oh, just be honest.
Yeah. Right. Because it's not always comfortable to hear sometimes when you're like kind of into doing a thing for a minute, and then they're just like, yeah,
maybe
maybe this isn't the path for you, but it's cool that you're experimenting and that you're expressing yourself. And I've had that a few times, and I'm like, oh, thanks for the.
I think it was just the thing, like the whole, the small country sort of syndrome. Like it's also, there was no real way for me to move forward as an instrumentalist in Australia at the time. Like it was really difficult to convince people to even give me a gig without singing, let alone
I see.
Sort of like think about touring and that sort of thing. So it was also just my way of going, oh, maybe this is how I can have a career more. But I was mid-20s, so I was still young and I don't know. Anyway, it was just
no. That's great. It's a good thing to be reminded of, is that it was in the not so distant past that strictly instrumental music was a lot harder to book. Right. So
yeah, totally. And I had no outlet, man. Like there was just, especially, Australia is difficult because it's a small country population wise, spread out a lot. So you've got, I think our population's about 26 million people here across a landmass bigger than the United States. So it's like there's just less people. So trying to, get the 40 to 50 people in a city to come to your show is just a lot harder. So, and back then, social media, pre-YouTube. YouTube was still the devil then, because it stole everything and gave it away for free, and you weren't allowed to do that. You know, it was just a different time. So
Yeah, I've watched. I mean, for myself, being in you know, immersed in the shredder world and stuff, I watched as like bands like Animals as Leaders and stuff, like and you know, like prior to them, obviously, like Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, and like even like Dixie Dregs and different people, you know, different bands that were kind of flying the flag for predominantly instrumental music. You know, doing a great job, but you know, you had to be like one of those like larger names to get booked, and even then, like they weren't trying to book you with bands that weren't instrumental. Like, I mean, it was kind of you wanted to keep you in a box, and then as the younger crowd came through and kind of like said, no, like we can mix, you know, expertly with other bills. And we can, you know, defy genres a bit and kind of fit in a couple different places, and bands like getting popular. Like I attribute currently like bands like Animals as Leaders, Scale the Summit, and Chon for the younger generation to really popularize not needing vocals in interesting music, and people being interested in like the different tonalities and
I think it's just also the whole, and you know, for all the bad things people say about the modern music industry, the great thing is that ability for all music to sort of get out. I know there's too much of it, but you know, so much of this music wouldn't be accessible or available without YouTube. And you know, even the streaming thing, as much as it hurts, like, I know I wouldn't have been able to tour the world the last 10 years if streaming didn't exist. People wouldn't have bought my album. I'm guaranteed they wouldn't have even bought it on iTunes, you know. But because it was accessible to stream, they might have actually listened to it once. And then, you know, hopefully they listened to it twice and then still treat it like when you bought a CD when you're 18 and it was, well, CD prices in Australia were $30. And if you hated it, you had to listen to it until you like it. But
ain't that the truth?
Yeah.
Or trade it off or give it away, you know, something else. You had to do something.
There was none of that, man. Not in my world. It was just, you listen to it till you got it. You know.
That's funny though. I mean, I very clearly remember, you know, going to the CD store, going to the record store and buying stuff based off of album artwork. Right. Yeah. Or the label or some random association. Oh, I like the song titles, you know, like, and I'd buy it and take it home like, oh, that first song sucks. Let's go. You know? Oh, that song's all right. Oh, third song's awesome, man. I'd play the shit out of that third song. And then slowly but surely, you know, I would give the other songs a chance. You know, maybe there's only a handful of songs on the album that you initially like, but then it grows on. You're like, you know what? I didn't like them at the beginning. And then like you said, you eventually, like, you come around, you're like, it's not so bad. Actually, they're kind of genius. Like, well, since I don't have anything else to listen to.
You know, my great example was that's how I got into Schofield.
Really?
Because I heard someone play a Schofield song randomly. Actually, this incredible guitar player, James Muller. Have you ever come across his name before?
I don't think so.
Australian guitar player, monster. Only plays in Australia, really, but like Alan Holdsworth did an interview with guitar player years ago, and the only guitar player he mentioned was James Muller.
Really? Whoa. Yeah. Okay.
He's done albums like with Chad Wackerman, and that he's like the jazz giant in Australia. He's incredible. But I heard him playing a Schofield song, and then I was like, oh, okay, I've got to go and check this guy out. And I bought a Schofield album, and I thought it was the worst thing I'd ever heard. I thought, this guy can't even play guitar properly. Like, he just, like, his notes are all wrong. And, you know, I listened to it so much that then eventually I got the genius of it. But initially I was like, man, this sound of like the whole... I was like, you can't play. Like, just play the note properly, man.
And learn to fret your notes, man.
And then, you know, after a while, like, man, the genius of it is that he's playing like he talks. Like, he literally talks like that, where he falls off the end of his words. And it's awesome. Like, he's just better. And yeah, to the point now where I've studied it enough to do it, that I can do that annoying thing off the fret where you go. It's awesome.
It's kind of reminiscent of an upright bass, you know, a double bass where it gets that against the wood, right? That resonance.
Mwah. Yeah. The mwah.
Mwah. Yeah, that which is a sound I love hearing in good recordings when it comes to jazz, and there's like especially trio-esque vibes where there's space for everything to happen, which I appreciate in your recordings, right? Like you tend to have really great sounding recordings as well as the actual music. So
thanks, man, because I actually mix and record them all as well. So
do you really?
Awesome.
All of them?
Yeah.
Man, great work.
Yeah. Just engineering was something, you know, like when I was a late teenager, I just went, we can't afford to go into a studio. So, you know, I bought a Rode NT1 for a fortune at the time and mic'd up everything with that and recorded albums for my band from the get-go and just learnt and crashed studios and, you know, would pay for a mastering of a track and just drill the mastering engineer of everything he's doing so I could learn to do it. And yeah, it's so cool. Super
cool. Super smart to, you know, obviously learn the things that you need the most, right?
Yeah.
There's a gap here. I don't know how to, I don't have anybody that can help me necessarily sort it out. I can't afford to do it. So I'm going to study.
Yeah. Yeah. It was good.
Man. Well, and so then what actually drove you? You said Tommy was one of your biggest inspirations. Did you hear him prior to learning to play and that was one of the motivations to pick up the instrument, or was it kind of more innocent in the beginning?
No, it was just I started playing organ first. Actually, I got sent to organ lessons, like 2 tiers and pedals. Not a Hammond, but like the Yamaha method. So I was always around music and had this natural inclination, and my dad just had a guitar that he can't play. But he had one and I picked it up when I was 8 and just sort of got into it. And I think my mum had seen Tommy Emmanuel on one of the TV shows. And so she bought me a cassette of that. And it was that same singing thing, I think, because I was like, I don't know, 8, 9 years old, whatever. And, you know, I was listening to like Billy Joel. I remember loving Billy Joel at the time. And, you know, I couldn't sing like Billy Joel, but when I heard Tommy Emmanuel, I was like, well, I can play guitar. I sound exactly the same. This is awesome. You don't need to sing. And so it just sort of drew me in. And it wasn't the virtuosity of it. It was just, it was the first instrumental music I was ever exposed to. So it was the seed was sown really young. And then the thing about, especially when I got into Tommy Emmanuel, he was predominantly a Telecaster player. So there were a couple of like acoustic songs on his album, but most of it was with a band and playing electric guitar and fairly shredding, actually, if you've never heard his old stuff.
Yeah, I haven't heard as much, but I've heard a little, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, and I think that's where the whole Telecaster thing still started for me. That's where it still all came from that initial inspiration of that. And it just sort of developed from there, where I was trying to learn things because I wanted to play them. I wasn't thinking that they were really difficult to play. Yeah. Like, and then, you know, learning things like on that first tape cassette I got, was, I'm trying to, his arrangement of Blue Moon, which has like a walking bass line going with the melody. And I remember just, you know, going, well, that's 2 people, that's fine. And then I think one day I'd sort of learnt both parts. And then one day I just realized I could start playing them both together. And it was I couldn't see him play it anywhere. There was no YouTube to go and look at. I couldn't go to a gig. So, yeah, just slowly started to work it up and work out oh, you can do these things at the same time.
Mm.
And so it's just sort of went from there, but it was learnt in little drops because no one really knew how to do it yet. Like it wasn't a, people didn't have those skills, and I didn't have teachers. Teachers could show me a little bit of it, but not all of it. And there was no other way to see it. So it took a long time to sort of get it all together.
Mm. And at what point did kind of the Charlie Hunter influence with like the 7-string and stuff come in?
Yeah, well, so essentially it came to that point where I was touring with Tommy, early 2000s. I was just opening free shows and we would play a couple of songs together. And it was amazing. Like, they were big venues in Australia, all sold out. I remember in 1 week I made enough money in CD sales to buy a new car. So wow. It was like, it was good times. But then I would try and go and do a gig somewhere else and it just wouldn't work. Like, like people didn't want to see it. Like they didn't want to know about it unless it was Tommy Emmanuel. Like it just sunk. And it was because it was probably a lot of that Chet Atkins style of stuff I was playing with the boom chick thing. Mm-hmm. And which is, I don't know, like if you, that sort of thing.
I love it.
Which is awesome. And it's funny because I talk about this a bit, but like if it had been like 5 years ago that this had happened, then that music would have gone over. Mm. But at the time in the early 2000s, it was all sort of still very rock and funk and that sort of thing, especially where I live. So I was then playing mainly electric guitar in like funk fusion bands. And that's what people were coming out to see. So that was cool. And then I found Charlie Hunter through John Mayer, actually.
Oh.
It was like John Mayer released like a live DVD and he plays a fan fret 6-string on one song. He was playing a Novax. That was actually his first signature model. Before he got a Martin or he got a signature Fender, he had a signature model Novax.
John Mayer did?
Yeah.
Gosh, I'm learning right now. I didn't know that. That's awesome. Yeah,
so the Novax XR. So it was cool because it sort of looks like this guitar. It was weird. It was a purple heart top, purple heart fretboard, sort of a skewed shape. It was a bigger body. It was almost this wide, I think. And it had 3 single coils in it. And so it was like a weird... And the cover of his first album, Room for Squares, there's a Novax on the couch behind him.
Okay. I'm going to have to go look that up.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So for Crazy Trip... So anyway, I was working in a guitar store at the time and I just had this playing on my laptop in the store. And this older, wiser musician came in and said, oh, that's cool. That's like guitar like Charlie Hunter plays. And I'm like, who? So, just... Growing up in Australia, I didn't have people giving me albums or access to this stuff. So he brought, and you couldn't really buy an album. So he brought in a CD for me and it just blew my mind. I was like, what? This is what I've always wanted to hear, like groove and funk and improvisation and fingerstyle guitar. And so, it just destroyed. Basically that day I got a Strat copy from a pawn shop, drilled out the headstock, put 2 bass machine heads on it, pulled out the bridge pickup, wired the neck pickup to one output, wired the middle pickup to another output, ripped out the pole pieces, so pulled out the pole pieces of the E and A. So I had 4 guitar strings going to a guitar amp and 2 bass strings going to a bass amp. And did 3 shows that weekend doing it. It was just like, it just blew my mind that was possible. But as soon as I heard it was possible, it was like, oh, of course.
Right.
And man, for Charlie to even come up with thinking it was possible, it still blows my mind that he went, you know what I should do? This.
So Charlie, I'm total fan. I mean, I don't worship every last thing he's ever done, but I had a whole season when I found him. I was living in Seattle, working at a music store. I worked at multiple music stores, and like like a CD store, right? Like I worked at a guitar stores a few times too, but I was working at this place called Silver Platters in Northgate, Seattle, and there was one of the things I loved about working at a music store, especially like it wasn't necessarily pre-internet. I mean, internet would just gotten started and stuff, but like, you know, we weren't dependent on it the way we are now, and people were still buying CDs and coming to a music store to, you know, to find out what's new. And what I loved about working at them was that there was always a weird mix of people that worked there and that frequented the place. So it was the way to like be in the know, is because there was a classical guy that like that ordered for all the classical stuff, and then there was a jazz guy. Sometimes those two guys hung out all the time and they would trade different weird things. And then there was like, I was the rock and metal guy, but I was always interested in other things, interested in hip hop and all that stuff. And the jazz guy, I played something. That was the thing. We'd all take turns playing music while, you know, and it had to be appropriate for it couldn't be too cussing or too heavy. And so, oh, hey, it's your turn, man. Put something on, you know? Okay. And somebody put on Duo, Charlie Hunter's Duo. And I was, and after like the second or third song, I was, who is this? This is great. And they're like, dude, you don't know who Charlie Hunter is? I'm like, no, I don't know. And they're like, this is one dude and a drummer. And I'm like, what? You know, like, and it was just like, and I had to go look at the album art and like, oh, it's even called Duo. Oh, cool. And so I started buying different things. I think he was a part of Garage à Trois, or he put that together, and all these different, I just kind of going down the rabbit hole with his music. And then it was like a few years later, I was working at the Whole Foods, the very first Whole Foods in Seattle. And I had got them on the News and Reviews or whatever, or not News and Reviews. That's a different one of the strangers. And I noticed that Charlie was coming to Jazz Alley there. And I was like, oh, I bought tickets for me and my girl. And it was a couple of days later, I was at work and somebody says, hey man, aren't you going to that Charlie Hunter, show tonight? I go, I am, man. I can't wait. And they're like, dude, he's here. He's shopping in the store right now. I'm like, oh, weird. Okay. So like I ran and got like I ripped an ad out of the paper and found a Sharpie and like walked down the cereal aisle and was like, oh, hey, is that you, Charlie Hunter? You know? And he's like, yeah. It was super cool. I was like, would you mind signing my stupid, my thing? He's like, yeah, man. He's like, are you coming to the show? And super nice. I was like, yeah, it's my girl's birthday actually. And so we're going to your show tonight. He's like, oh, cool. Well, I'll see you there. We get there and we just happened to be like one of the first people sat down. So they said, hey, do you want to sit up close? I said, yeah, of course. I want to sit right up front. And it was a duo gig. It was a drummer and him and his 2 amps and his cool 7-string with the 2 outputs and everything. And I swear, I mean, like, it was just such a cool thing. He walks out and he looks down. He's like, oh, hey, Chrys, is this your girl? Happy birthday. Like he knew us, the whole thing. And I was just like, okay, you're a legend. You're one of my favorite people.
Charlie is the best, man. And he like been such a huge influence on me, technique, sound, and career wise, and just how he conducts himself with everything. He's a pretty special dude. So, I personally owe a lot to him and his whole thing. So, and like when I first met him, it was this massive, ridiculous ordeal. So this is a pretty cool story. My first time in the US by myself, I'd been to Disneyland when I was a kid with my parents, but I saw Charlie was playing. I'd worked it out how to do it. I was in New York. My first time in New York. I'd been there for a couple of days. And Charlie was playing a show outside. It was Rochester, upstate New York. So I got on a Greyhound bus and went up there 10 hours on this bus to see this gig. On the way up, so I was traveling with, a bag and a guitar. On the way up, my bag got stolen off the bus.
Oh.
So I turn up, I'm on a like 7-week overseas sort of one. It was basically I was 26. So I was like, it was almost my scouting thing of going, could I do music properly, or is it time to go and do something else?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, and I've got no money either. So I had to go somewhere, buy some clothes, because I had shorts and a t-shirt and a jacket and a little tiny backpack. I had, you know, no toiletries, no deodorant. So I had to go and buy, you know, just some stuff so I could go to this gig. This gig I realized was not in Rochester, but it was a festival like 30 minutes out. So I had to get a cab there, pre-Uber and everything. So, you know, that was another $50 or $60 to get this cab. Got out there. I was thinking that this festival is going to be huge, like, you know, thousands of people. There's about 100 people there. And so, you know, I'm like, and Charlie plays this gig. It's unbelievable. Like, I'm just the most insane thing ever. I go to talk to him after the gig and just, you know, give him a CD and say, oh man, this was a song I wrote in dedication of you, like, and the influence. I just thank you. Like, this has been amazing. And then I, you know, go, okay, cool. I walk away and, you know, look at my vintage cell phone of the time. There's no reception. There's nothing. I'm like, oh, how am I getting back? I don't. And he walks up to me and goes, man, what are you doing? I was like, oh, dude, I can't, I'm staying back here. And he's like, well, we're staying in the hotel next door. Like, come back with us, have some dinner. So go out with Charlie, have dinner. It was insane. And then I lost contact with him for a couple of years after that. And then, yeah, there was a strange circumstance where I did find his contact details. Someone would give them to me. Then it nearly blew a surprise engagement to my wife. She was working in New York at the time and I was flying over to surprise her, and he had to keep this secret because he was about to, she was like, oh, Charlie's playing a gig now. I'm going to go see him. And I already talked to Charlie to say, hey man, we should hang out and play. And then had to say, oh man, if you see this Australian girl, don't tell her anything about me.
Keep it quiet. It's kind of important.
Yeah. So, but yeah, you know, like that was great. And then just seeing how he, you know, sort of conducted his career, because in my mind, I'd seen very different sort of all or nothing examples of how to have a music career and not have anything else in your life. And, you know, when I met Charlie, you know, well, from the exterior, who knows? But, you know, like, he'd drop his kids to school, pick them up, have people come over and hang out and play, living just outside of New York, and then, you know, go on tour for a few weeks here and there. And it was just like, it was a much more, you know, foundational life that I was like, oh yeah, well, this is cool. Like, it's not this all or nothing on the road 300 days a year. There's nothing else in your life sort of thing. So
wow, what a valuable example he was for you in that way, right? Because, and I love hearing that for all the reasons, just because I love it when somebody comes along and I mean, we already spoke to Charlie being an innovator and somebody that just said, you know what, I'm going to do something that y'all never seen before. And here's that. But then to also approach his situation in a way that is balanced and very, you know, family centric, and like, no, life has still got to happen too. Can't be out there doing only one thing and then not and expect everything else to still operate, right? So it was he's an amazing man, amazing musician, and just a super cool dude. So that's awesome. I love that's because I remember I've seen him a few times since then, but that first night I was literally like had goosebumps the whole night, being right in the front row watching and trying to watch his bass playing and the the
Yeah.
thing, just to see like how there's two people in his body. Because I also don't like tap my head and rub my belly
No,
at the same
but
time very well.
yeah,
So,
and it's the incredible thing of, it seems like a gimmick until you hear it, until you go, okay, well, there's an interplay that two people can't do there.
right.
It's a thing that has to sort of be one person, but it makes musical sense why you would do it if you could.
And I would say that he, in a lot of ways, because when I first listened to the music, I was really aware, obviously, like that. I'm like, well, he's crafting these tones that kind of sound like Leslie and organ tones that are on a guitar, and he's really separating his bass playing from the guitar register in this way through these little tonality tweaks and the way he's affecting that. And that really actually made me love that sound, that kind of Leslie vibe that he created on there, and that kind of warbly thing, and how the separation really came in. It made it more feel like there's an extra person in the room, right?
Yeah. It's pretty special, man. Like I had a chorus pedal from when I was a teenager that someone older gave me, and I'd never used it. And then when I heard that, I'm like, oh, maybe that will do the organ sound for me. And it was, I put a video up on Instagram the other day of me playing it, because I've done a few shows on I actually have one of Charlie's old guitars now, which is cool.
Novak's, the one that the 7-string is yours?
I have, it's a Traugott, actually. So it's Jeff Traugott built the guitar, but it was Charlie's. So it's, it's still fan fret, massive splay on it, 29-inch on the low E. Oh. So it's the E of a bass string. Charlie actually tunes to G, so that at 29-inch, that's roughly where you would fret a G on a 34-inch scale bass. I see. But I sort of like the dull, short scale sound. And then it's 25.5-inch on the highest string. Got it. Yeah. So it's a serious fan.
Yeah, it's like so far. That was the thing that I look at those guitars and it drives me nuts because the fan starts so far out. But then I have to realize that's because it's a bass. These are bass strings, actual bass register that you're trying to pick up. It's not these newer guitars that have that are just guitars where the fan is just it's not so extreme.
It's like what, a 1-inch differential, or
like a 1.5 inch at the most, right? Versus like, what is it, 2?
Well, that one's 4.5.
4. Oh yeah, so
like
big.
It's huge. So I got an acoustic 6-string made a while ago by Jeff Traugott as well. I don't have it anymore, but it had a 2-inch differential on it, because I'm like, if you're going to do fan frets, you've got to do it seriously. So it was 25 to 27-inch, but just tuned in standard.
And that was just guitar strings, or did you have
just guitar strings?
Interesting. What was your tuning on that then?
Just standard tuning. So it was cool. Yeah. So what it did, it sort of had this psycho acoustic effect where the low E sounded deeper. Anyway, people always thought it was down tuned, that guitar. I guess, getting into ergonomics, I realized I was having a lot of trouble playing it with my right hand after a while, my picking hand. So why is that? I was, where my hand had to sit on the instrument for it to sound good, I was always like having to float my arm and twist this way, because if I put my hand in the normal position where the bass was sort of tight on the guitar, then the treble strings I was playing so close to the bridge. And then if it was there, so I was always doing this weird compensation with my arm, and I realized just my shoulders, and I was, just getting super tired everywhere. And, I always assumed it was my left hand because of the fan. And then after a while I went, oh no, it's actually my right hand is the issue with this. So,
compensating to make sure that the higher notes don't sound so tinny by the bridge, right? So they can kind of warm up a little bit.
Yeah, because you wanted the sort of, especially on an acoustic instrument, you
Yeah.
sort of wanted the bass to be punchy. So you didn't want it to be playing really close to the end of the neck, but so you sort of wanted to be playing over that sound hole, but you couldn't quite. I had a lot of trouble doing it, and it took me a long time to work that. That's what I was actually struggling with. But yeah, so no more fan fret 6-string guitars for me.
Got it. But you got the one Novak, or no, not Novak. It's the, what was it called?
Well, it's Traugott.
Traugott.
Jeff Traugott. He's in Santa Cruz.
Is he still making Charlie's guitars? Or?
No, so Charlie. Well, we'll just turn this into a Charlie podcast.
Sorry.
Anyway,
It's not my intent.
Charlie actually has his own guitar company now that makes them, called Hybrid Guitars.
Oh.
And it's cool because they sort of make that guitar accessible price wise,
Cool.
more so than it used to be. So giving it a go is a little bit easier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. I'll have to follow up and look at that. Go down that rabbit hole. I haven't followed him close enough to know that. So
yeah.
But
no, I'm super gear nerd, man.
Love it.
I talk about not leaving choices out for me, but I kind of keep up to date with most things. So,
but that's probably why why. I mean, it kind of. I think in a lot of ways it takes a lot of restraint to like cut things out of the mix ultimately, right? So that you can get back to playing, which you're smart enough to know that about yourself, that there's a point of option paralysis that's going to seep in, and you're going to go, oh no, wait, okay, give me less knobs to twist, so that's super smart. But in it's probably also because you actually have a gear lust on some level, that that about yourself.
I think it's getting really super like, and part of this whole process for me, even like getting into fan frets and all that, was just knowing I really want to know exactly what I need to create what I want to do. So I kind of am crazy about all the things like, the boost pedal I just got. I'm like, well, does it flip the polarity when you turn it on? Because it's single transistor, stuff like that. And, like pickup magnets and just all the things I am super nerdy about. But that's the joy of the guitar and the musical instrument industry now, that you can get that nerdy about things.
So on that thread, what are maybe your top 3 or 4 drive pedals that you say that can kind of interchange? That I think you mentioned somewhere about Chase Bliss and like some different. I'd be interested to know.
Well, so the 2 pedals that basically stay on my board these days are a Strymon Flint. So just for mainly trem and reverb if I don't have reverb in the amp. And the buffer in that is awesome. It's the best sounding buffer I've heard to drive back to the amp. So that's why that's there. The little Strymon pedals, I really like their buffer in. As soon as they get bigger, the buffer is weird and has weird interaction things like timelines and that stuff.
Okay.
So super nerd. The Chase Bliss Mood, I used to use a DL4 for like looping stuff. And then I went to the Strymon Timeline with a little MIDI controller to do looping because DL4s break all the time. And, but then when I was moving to America, I was like, I can't travel with a Timeline and it's too big for how much I use it. So I found the Chase Bliss Mood, and basically it's got a looper on one side and a delay on the other side, but really random stuff. Like the looper doesn't have start or stop, it just has start.
Oh.
So it's like always listening to what you're doing. So the way I have it set up is that, well, I have a couple, but my main one is that it basically hears sort of the last 3 seconds of what you play. When I hit the button, it then plays that in reverse.
Oh.
Randomly. So I just get this instant reverse pad to play over.
I love that. Now I need one. I'm gonna write it. That's the Mood, the Chase Bliss Mood.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
that sounds
which you
cool.
can do like with a DL4. If you play some stuff, you hit start, you hit stop, you double tap to go into reverse. But this just made it, once again, like performance easier. Like instead of me looking down at my pedals, tapping things, I could just create this thing really quick. And so I've really enjoyed having it there.
Yeah, the
And
DL4 has always been a little, it's too many moving parts for me to want to engage
well,
the
the
pedal.
problem is there's moving parts inside it and it stops working. Uh, they just released a new one. Hopefully they fix that.
I did see that. Hopefully it's better. Yeah.
Looks cool. And then drive-wise, it's a couple of Japanese companies. So Vemarem Janray has been a mainstay for a long time. The Free the Tone SOV2, which is a cool pedal. I run it really low gain. Most of Unify is actually that on for the whole thing through my 2-rock, which I play at really low volumes as well because I've been, I play at home so much at low volumes. I've just realized I like the sound of my amps at low volumes. So, they really never go past 9 o'clock on the master volume. So that pedal's really cool. What's the other one that comes in and out is the Rocket Blue Note. And I've had that for a really long time. It just does low gain really well. And then I have a Nordveng Custom number 1, which is a clone again. And he's really, the Nordveng thing is really blown up. He's a huge Mayer fan. So all the pedals now are named after Mayer things. But the original one he made, he upped the voltages in certain areas of the pedal. So it's not a straight clone, but it drives the germanium transistors harder. So the drive in it is really dynamic and sort of spongy and fuzzy at the same time. And it's a really unique sort of sound. So like the song Chapters is all that pedal on the whole thing with a Collings archtop played through it. And then the song, like my highest selling song ever, or played song as well, is called Habit. And the solo in that is that pedal. And you can kind of just hear how it's just there, but then it's really touch sensitive. It's awesome. Yeah.
And did I see that you have some sort of T-Rex pedal with like a tube in it or something? Do you use that very often?
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Oh, it doesn't? Oh, bummer.
I put up a picture of that the other day because I actually bought that a long time ago. It was super expensive, and that was my acoustic pedal. I basically took that everywhere with me for reverb. It's a reverb pedal with a tube. And I use that sort of like just as a preamp to control the tube just controlled the dynamics of an acoustic live pretty well. And then the reverb, I just always need just a touch of reverb on acoustic. So I had that for a long time working, but the reverb's dead in it. So,
I see.
But the tube still does something special. So I put it into my acoustic rig again the other day just to... I pulled it apart one more time to see if I could work out what the problem was and tried 5 different 12-volt power supplies with it to check it wasn't a power supply thing. But it's just a weird thing where the reverb sometimes works and it sometimes doesn't.
Yeah, it was just interesting to see. I don't see T-Rex pedals very often these days. I mean, there was a season probably back when you did get that. It was the time when everybody was like, "Oh, T-Rex!" Like, and I still have one that I really love. That it's the Molar pedal, the original Molar. It's got the kind of 2 sections. It's got your gain, like overdrive, and then a boost in it. And I always loved that it had a mix knob in the center of that, so that for a metal guy that really loved his amp, I had a VHT Pitbull, or no. Was a VHT Deliverance 120.
Yeah, nice.
Single channel amp, like just wide open, but it was so dry and tight that you had to kind of, if you wanted to solo or you wanted it to be a little bit edgier, you had to add something to it. And
some juice.
I found that Molar pedal, and I loved that I could gain it up. Like I could turn the gain all the way up and boost it, but then just mix it in a little bit on top of the amp, and you still got the fundamental sound of
Yeah.
the amplifier.
Yeah,
So,
T-Rex was a thing then. They also made the original, or not the original, when TC Electronics started making pedals again. I think T-Rex were the one making them for them.
oh, that would make sense.
They were in the, like, sort of like in that casing, like the old Chorus. I don't know if you... that one.
Vaguely, I do. They're a little bit wider
Yeah, like, and
casing.
they were black and they just had like a strip of color along them. I did a trade show for TC back in like 2008.
Mm.
Actually, that was, I parked my car somewhere in Sydney, and that's when all those CDs got stolen while I was doing that trade show, because I didn't go to my car for 3 days. Random. Anyway.
It's all a big circle.
Yeah, exactly, man. Yeah. But yeah, all those overdrive pedals sound the same. If I played them for you now and switched them on and off, like, you wouldn't hear it. But, you know, it's all in the feel of things again. That's what I'm always chasing. And I'm always looking for something that does low gain, just so low. It's funny, like, you know, I haven't bought pedals for a while, but I actually got a few this week. And, you know, I just find with them all the way off, there's still too much gain for me. So I'm always looking for things that, you know, I can turn the gain up a little bit more and it's where it needs to be instead of being all the way off. And I really want to keep turning it off. So, yeah, it's funny.
Did you ever? I don't remember if maybe I tried to push it on you back then, but the MXR Sugar Drive, was that something that you ever checked out? It's like a little mini
I tried that, man. Yeah, it was cool. It was. I think the clon thing in general is still too mid-rangey for me.
Ah, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was nice about the Sugar Drive was you could turn the buffer off in it though, because I've never been a fan of the clon buffer.
Yeah, it's like a love-or-hate thing.
Takes out some bottom end and sometimes does some weird interaction with Strymon pedals as well.
Really?
As a weird side note, yeah.
Because of the buffer, maybe?
The buffer does something weird, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a strange thing, man. Yeah, the buffer thing is, you know, that's another huge thing why I have a tiny pedal board is because the buffer thing drives me nuts. I just like finding the right amount of pedals and the right buffer so that the amp still feels the way it needs to when it's clean. Yeah.
Do you have a particular taste in cables for that reason too?
Yeah.
What do you use?
Analysis Plus.
I've never heard of them.
Yeah. Can't remember where they're out of, but yeah, I've been using their cables for about 12 years now. That's all I use. And they're fat and chunky, but you can hear it and feel it with those. They're the ones I use are super hi-fi, so they're more bottom end, more top end than your average cable. But yeah, definitely the feel. Yeah, I have a lot of trouble playing without that cable. You know, I would almost like if I'm going away and I can only take a guitar and one thing, it would be a guitar and that cable before I take anything else. Like, you
That's
know,
a big
I'd
compliment.
happily at a gig plug into a DI direct to the PA with that cable and like this guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the number one. That's your signature guitar, right?
Yeah, it is the Huber. It's become my signature guitar simply because people started ordering them. They just wanted the same one. So it was cool that I never thought that would actually happen. But yeah, it was just the thing of combining a number of the Huber guitars I really liked. And, you know, it goes back to that first time we met that was the prototype of this shape where Nick had made smaller guitars, his normal body shape. And for this, he wanted a 335, but all he did was go into the CNC machine and widen it to the 335 width. And it was funny because, like, when I first saw it, it looked really weird, like, because the widths here are, like, way wider than a guitar. They would normally come in.
It is, yeah.
The waist, it would normally come in more. But, you know, I'd borrowed a lot of Nick's guitars before I could get one. So and even people would bring them to me in shows, like in Europe. Someone would go, oh, here's a Huber for you to play. I'm like, great, awesome, thank you. And what I realized whenever I'd see photos of me, especially when I was performing solo and sitting down, is that when it sits in my lap, it's like the perfect height. Like it doesn't need any lift. I don't need to lift my leg to get it. It was like, wow, my posture was always really good when I played it. Like, rather than like when, if you play a Les Paul seated and it sits way down and
Right.
you're hunching over the guitar. So, yeah.
Well, it's a beautiful guitar. I assume that's a maple top, yeah?
That's redwood.
Oh, it's redwood. Oh, I
So
thought it might have been stained maple,
No,
but
it's completely natural. It was actually the first guitar that they hadn't ever stained. This one.
Wow, even
So
cooler.
I had to convince them not to use a stain at all. And it's got a lot deeper as it's got older. Like it was quite pink when I got it 5 years ago, and it's really, sort of come to life over time. And then it's just mahogany back and sides. And
Oh, wonderful. Look at that.
yeah, the mahogany is actually, so the cool thing, the mahogany is routed out. So the sides, back and block are all one piece.
Oh,
On
wow.
this particular guitar.
Wonderful. So you got
There
one
would be
resonant piece there.
Yeah, there would usually be two piece. I think it was just when he built this, he had one piece that was big enough. So he did it. And then it's just, mahogany neck, rosewood board, open gear tuners on mine. Just because I don't know, just a touch of brightness adds a little bit back to it. And then Lola gold foil single coils in this one. So
What a great company, Lawler.
yeah, so it's it just because I was playing this telly that I'd built for years before this, and I was worried that this wouldn't maybe knock it off the perch, but it certainly sort of has. And it's just a cool guitar because I can do any gig on it. Like I can play a full-on rock gig. It sort of gives off like Gretsch sort of vibes. Then I can do a jazz gig. I can do a solo acoustic show sort of with it. It just sort of does whatever I need it to do. So it's been awesome.
And it's I assume it's a build to order situation. If you want one of these guitars, right? You call up
I
Huber.
think so. Like some of them dealers stock them sometimes. It just depends. So there's a few dealers around the world that have just got them in stock.
And what do they go for? Do you know?
I think, and this is a long, they're around €7,000. Like I think so. Usually, I think in the States they end up around $9,000. I saw one in Australia. They were 14. It was 14 grand, I think, in Australia. So it's a serious investment of a guitar, but it's like, it's that thing of when you play it, you go, oh yeah, that's why this exists. Like most good guitars, there are certain guitar companies where they sort of look flashy and are expensive, and there's not much life to them. And then there's other ones where you just pick it up straight away and you go, oh yeah, that's why this is there.
I've been to a few small time like artisan guitar like showings, or like things, and where it's all these small time builders. Some of them are big in that world, but like there are all these beautiful arch tops that have meticulous, like, one piece, this, exotic wood, that, and the inlays. Sometimes it's about the aesthetic, but a lot of times though that crowd is about this style of building where it's all very meticulously done, but it's simply for the tone, right? Simply, it's not in that way. And I think you have a few other really interesting guitars. I don't know the names of them, but like, some of them have the sound holes that are very unique and very unique places that are kind of like in the curves of the guitar that aim up at you and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a few guitars like, I have an insane Michael Greenfield acoustic, and like Andy McKee plays Greenfield guitars as well. But he's like acoustic design, the way he builds a guitar is really incredible. And the bracing is somewhere between a steel string and a modern classical guitar. And so it has this incredible dynamic range when you touch it and that sort of thing. And then a guitar that I borrowed it for a long time when I was living in the States in 2019 when I was there is one of Ken Parker's arch tops.
Oh, yeah.
So like Ken, famous sort of for the Parker Fly.
Mm-hmm.
So that was his company, but he builds these archtop acoustic guitars that are like nothing you've ever seen or heard or played. They're like when you first play one, the sound is so insane you feel like it's going to explode in your lap, like it's terrifying.
Wow.
And it's so light, but yeah, the neck is carbon fiber and it floats on a little block, and the way you adjust the action is an Allen key that moves the neck further and closer away from the strings. And
really,
yeah, it's
wow.
the real, yeah, it's just the incredible juncture of like industrial design and sound and music and all of it. Yeah, Ken's stuff is pretty revolutionary.
I mean, he's a legend, you know, and the Parker Fly was revolutionary, and still is in some ways, right? And it pushed things forward. And I knew that he was doing something else, and I knew, you know, of the legend, but I didn't know.
They're very rare. Like he only builds like 4 of them a year because they required that much detail, and they're I don't know, they're well into the $30,000 and $40,000 mark.
Okay.
But
that's why I don't have one.
But once again, there's sort of that thing of like when you play it, you sort of get it. Like they're some of the best playing guitars I've ever played. And Ken, another person that's become a dear friend. And but yeah, he like the people that own his guitars are super generous people that are into music as well. I remember I was touring Japan a few years ago, and I got this random email saying, "Hey, I have a Ken Parker guitar. Would you like to play it?" And I was thinking he meant a Fly. And I was like, I'm okay. I don't need a Fly. And then he said, no, I have this archtop. And so he brought it to my concert to play. And it was funny because Ken had sold it to a dealer in Japan. And it was the only guitar he didn't know where it had ended up. So it was cool to sort of reconnect the dots of where this guitar is now.
Very cool.
Yeah. Crazy. Yeah, they're worth just checking out his website because they're a beast.
Yeah, I'm going to go down the rabbit hole on that for sure.
Yeah. He also has awesome... the cool thing about Ken is he's got great recordings on his site from people. For example, like Charlie Hunter doing like... has like 8 songs recorded on this guitar, and Bill Frisell and Doug Wamble and all these cool people playing it.
That's great information. Thank you for sharing that. Well, I would start to wrap things up here, but I want to have an opportunity to ask you, because of your unique place in the guitar world, maybe you can share with us a couple of players or albums, or that maybe not the whole world knows a lot about, that you say, hey, like this player, or this album or whatever, check out these guys you might not know,
Off the top of my head, let me think of random. So the one I mentioned earlier is James Muller. He's a hard one to find. He doesn't have much music online, unfortunately, but there are a few YouTube things, and he is incredible. And
how do you spell the last name?
Muller.
James Muller. Okay.
Yeah.
He's there in Australia, yeah?
He's in Australia, yeah. So, yeah, he's, just unbelievable. I'm just trying, so many of the things I love are just everyone knows about. So it's like, Bill Frisell and,
amazing.
and I've got super into Gilad Helixman the last few months. His stuff is really amazing.
Do you have a favorite Bill album? Bill Frisell?
I other than his like one of his most recent ones, Valentine, it's still probably got to be Good Dog, Happy Man.
Okay. And
you can probably hear the influence of that album on most of my music.
Cool.
Yeah. It's it's pretty awesome. I'm just trying to think of who else I should point you in the direction of. Well, actually, a couple of friends of mine who are really amazing, like Newcastle people. so my hometown, just, you know, is an incredible singer, songwriter, guitarist, producer by the name of Daniel March, and he's just a monster. And he just released this album called Modern Artifact, and you know, he's a huge Prince fan, so he loves trying to play all the stuff on his albums, and
Cool.
it's really unique. And yeah, he's a big industry pusher and fairness for like streaming and that sort of thing. And one of the cool things I love talking about listening to an album is that he, you know, you could buy his album on vinyl and Bandcamp and those sorts of things, but when he released it to streaming, he released the whole album as one track.
Oh.
So that people would, in the idea, you've got to listen to the whole album.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
That's a sweet little trick. Did it work?
I don't think so, but but I you know, I respect the art of it and the idea
Same.
of it. I think that was really cool. You know, if you could not skip on Spotify, that would be an awesome thing.
Yeah, you know, and that's one of those modern things that I feel like an old guy even saying it. I feel like kids these days, they just don't understand, like you know, when you had a cassette tape and you put it in, like you rarely, until you got to know the album, you weren't fast forwarding, rewinding all over the place to try to find the thing. You just had to put it on and let it play, and then try to like the tracks you didn't initially like.
Totally,
you know?
totally, yeah. That's, you know, the whole idea of having to play something until you like it. I still try to do it all the time, like go through and actually, if I hear something I like, find the album it's on and listen to the whole thing several times till I, you know, get it or don't get it, and then
there's nothing quite like
thing.
it. There's nothing quite like I will say that this one of my favorite things that I maybe I don't encounter it as much because I'm so in control of like the streaming and my music. And I mean, I have a vinyl collection that I love too, that keeps me that I can go back and put an album on, right? And I do listen to albums, but I think that it's one of the things that you know, is kind of missing in a way. And it happened a lot more back in the day when I would buy something and then it'd be like, you know, you initially don't like a thing, heard it the fifth time, you're like, oh wait, is this actually super genius? And I've been in resistance to the super genius of this person the whole time. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it clicks and you're like, oh shit, this is maybe my favorite thing. And how long did I spend like not liking a thing? Yeah. I love it. Yeah, the release, because that first part of it's tension. It's almost like bugging. It's like nagging you, you know, to like give it more time and more space. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, I hate that I'm going to turn around and tell everybody how good this is when I've been talking shit about it. You know? Yeah,
I think, you know, is doing the grumpy old man thing. I think you know, that's the saddest thing I find with, you know, current music consumption is just that idea of it's the initial thing of like, oh, I don't like that done. You don't give anything a chance, you know. When I was teaching at universities, I was always trying to drill into my students. I'm like, well, just listen to all of this a few times. But yeah, can't win.
Okay, kids out there, slow it down. Let it play. And
listen to things you don't like.
Hey, listening to opposing points of view, which in a music world, something you don't like is an opposing point of view, right? Something that initially you're like, oh, it's not my thing. But if you're willing to hear someone out that has a different opinion, and you can maybe contact that place of humanity while you are truly listening, right? Like so, then we can go. We have an opportunity to potentially have a deeper connection, whether we may still disagree. We still may not like the music. I've listened to it 3-4 times. Okay, it's still not my thing, but we can appreciate the humanity behind it, the effort that went into it, at least.
Well, you know, getting super deep, it's the whole metaphor for most things, really, isn't it? Yep.
That's the point.
Actually listening. Yep.
Adam, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure,
And,
man. I'm
dude,
sorry it's been a bit long, but it's been a good chat.
hey, no, it's good. I like long talks, and
Yeah.
and it's been good that this podcast has served that interesting place for me, to stay in touch and to not that I need a reason to catch up with you, but it is a great reason to catch up with
Totally.
you,
Yeah.
and then leave it out there and let people glean from it what they will, because they're interested in what you're up to, and I hope a few new people pop over and check out your music and end up coming out and seeing you live and supporting your music.
Yeah. And hopefully I'll be out in the world soon.
Yeah. Let me know when you're coming this way, man. If you come up through Northern California, I'd love to even help you book a show up in my area if possible, or just try to catch you on the road.
I'll be up that way, man. It'll be awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, have a great rest of your evening. Thanks for staying up late for my schedule. And
pleasure, man.
We'll stay in touch.
All right. Thanks so much, Chris.
You got it.
Rock on, man.
Take care, Adam.
Players Pick Podcast, Picks and Perspective with Chrys Johnson.
Players Pick Podcast is brought to you in part by our good friends at Dunlop Guitar Products, Kiesel Custom Guitars, and our favorite new coffee company, Road Roaster Coffee. Use coupon code PLAYERSPICK for 20% off your first order at roadroastercoffee.com.